Gather round the campfire, children, for me to tell you the tales of my youth and of the greatest trilogy, the one to rule them all, the good things, the Lord of the Rings. Hey guys, Brent here with Geek Variants, back to break down yet another exciting, good and bad part of our series we've had going on. For everything good, there must be something bad. And today we're talking about what's good with the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And if you're already subscribed to the channel, you already know what it is. You already know what we do. You know what the amazing style of content. If not, hit us with like or dislike based upon your view of this video as we continue to get going. But look, things are simply put. This movie, in my opinion, is the greatest trilogy of all time. Period, simple, and point blank. However, for all good things, there must be something bad about it. Otherwise, it's blind worship, and well, we don't do that here. Everything has to be looked at critically, but let's talk about what went amazing with this. Let's just look at some basic scores, basic audience reviews, basic critic reviews. We'll talk about those first. Look, Fellowship of the Ring, 91% on Rotten Tomatoes, 92% on Metacritic, 8.8 on IMDb. Very good. The Two Towers, 95% Rotten Tomato score, the highest Rotten Tomato score of the trilogy, and my personal favorite film of all three of them, 87% on Metacritic. This one was the least favorite according to Metacritic, 8.8 on IMDb as well. Then, The Return of the King, 93% Rotten Tomato, 94% on Metacritic. Highest scored for Metacritic, period. And I got a 9 on the IMDb, so the highest there. So, in conclusion, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, 93% average across 3 films for Rotten Tomatoes. Averages a 91% on Metacritic, and it averages an 8.86 for the IMDb, which would round up to 8.9. So overall, very highly reviewed, very well liked by casual viewers, the regular audience, the people that we genuinely tend to care more about. Critics have a lot to say, but if the audience doesn't like it, who's going to go see it? You know what I'm saying? But look, let's talk about the critics. They do have an opinion, and it does matter to some extent. And as far as their opinion goes, this was the highest award-winning trilogy of all time. Period. End of discussion. 475 wins out of 820 nominations. Easily number one up until, I believe, just last year. A new film has beaten them in terms of awards, but at the same time, this stood since 2003. 20 years later, when movie awards, categories, and film awards, period, are oversaturated and adding more and more and more categories per year so that each and every little film can get an award added onto it. So 475 at the time of its inception is incredible. This was the premier fantasy film of the 2000s. Marvel can take a hike. This trilogy won 11 Oscar awards, tied for the most all time with, what you ask? Titanic and Ben-Hur. Legendary films, Return of the King tied each of those. Just the Return of the King. We're not even talking about Two Towers. We're not even talking about Fellowship. Just one of the 3. Very fantastic. And it's one of only 2 fantasy films all time. It was the first to ever take home an Oscar award. That all changed in 2017 when The Shape of Water was added to that, but congratulations on them on the win. More than happy to share everything else we got going around. And some of the reasons this film succeeded, in large part, let's just look point blank to the author, J.R.R. Tolkien. You set a beautiful foundation, and when it was followed, like it was for these 3 books, and yes, there were things omitted, and there are things that were left out that I'll talk about in the Why It Was Bad next Friday. However, for this Friday, talk about all the good things that were added from this book to make everything come to life. And to have a book come to life, you need great acting performances. You need great musical performances. And obviously, the music, Howard Shore. Are you kidding me? How could we go wrong? I know I spent so much time talking about Rings of Power and The Hobbit in terms of how great their musical scores were. This is probably one of the top 5 music scores all time, period. Howard Shore is a top 5 composer all time, personally, in my opinion. John Williams, Hans Zimmer, Nino Rota, and Bernard Herrmann are my personal top 5. Howard Shore easily deserves to be up here just alone for Silence of the Lambs, but then you got the fact that he did Lord of the Rings on top of that. It is easily one of the most hummable, let alone singable tracks out there. Yeah, Howard Shore, hats off to you, my friend. Hats off to you. You did an amazing job. And speaking of amazing jobs, let's talk about the people that were cast in this film. And I'm going to talk a little bit in the bad of things that were the original desires for the cast of certain people who you wouldn't think would play certain actors. And luckily, none of those came to pass. Instead, we got the acting cast that we did. And just stop me if you've heard of a few of these names. I'm just going to read them off down here. I got a list. I actually have to look at this. Ian McKellen, Andy Serkis, Viggo Mortensen, Orlando Bloom, Sean Astin, Sean Bean, Liv Tyler, Kate Blanchett, the late, great Christopher Lee, Hugo Weaving, and that's not even mentioning Elijah Wood, who was the premier role of Frodo, as well as Carl Urban. Oh, Butcher from The Boys. So, that's kind of a very, very heavy cast of stars and very, very talented people who all delivered amazing performances. Some of these performances were even delivered through injuries. Viggo Mortensen got injured twice just to be that guy. He broke his foot famously for kicking one of the Uruk helmets and can deliver his best performance for him shouting in the Two Towers. Just got to look at that one up. That was phenomenal. That was something definitely worth looking into there for you guys. As well as we had Sean Astin injured the living daylights out of his feet. And for those of you who don't watch like the Lord of the Rings, the appendices, they have so much extra content, even not counting the beloved extended editions. Sean Astin stepped on a piece of glass entering the river to go get to Frodo, and originally in the Fellowship of the Ring. And when they finally were able to unwrap all the prosthetics that they had his feet in to make it look Hobbit-like, it is one of the gnarliest gashes you can see. I will not be posting it on screen, but it's something you can look up in your own time. You can tell that hurt. Awful to see. Very gross, but still delivered a star performance even after this injury. And on top of that, Orlando Bloom injured his ribs falling off a horse in the Two Tower scenes. So there were a couple injuries throughout, not to mention John Rhys Davies also injured himself. So in the Two Towers, when you have that running scene of Legolas, Aragorn, and Gimli, all 3 of them are injured. And they're doing their absolute damnedest to pretend that they are not. Just based upon the order of sequences that they put out on screen, you would not be able to tell that they were hurt. But I mean, if you look very, very closely, or you watch The Lord of the Rings yearly, as I do, because it's one of the greatest trilogies ever made, and I can't indulge in it enough, they were hurt, but you're barely going to be able to tell. This trilogy holds a very special place in my heart, because the music was absolutely exceptional. Each and every set piece came to life. The cast brought the characters life in ways, and each and every one of their stories was tied up beautifully at the end, even though there are things that I can critique, and I will do so next Friday objectively. It is my job. That's why I'm here. That's why you're watching. I have to be able to critique these things. But so far, we're talking about what's good. And the actors delivered phenomenal performance. Peter Jackson delivered his greatest directing job ever. And there are very, very few things about this I would consider redoing, let alone I don't think this trilogy should ever be remade, but we know how, Hollywood works. Every 20 to 30 years, something will be dug up from the grave and butchered when it should never have been touched. Unfortunately, at some point in time, this will probably be what happens to the Lord of the Rings trilogy. But Peter Jackson, hats off to you. You did an incredible job. We greatly appreciate your efforts in this, and the fact that you broke down crying at the very, very end scene and just embraced Elijah Wood. And just been thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, like 1,000 times over, according to Elijah Wood, goes to show how much passion and desire you put into this project. And some of us wish you would put that same desire into The Hobbit, but I already listed everything I thought was wrong with that in a separate video, so you guys can go check that out. I mean, said, I don't have really anything else for you. This movie was one of the best stories ever told. It had some of the best actors alive to do anything for it. The music composed itself brilliantly and brought each and every moment to life in a way that every little detail is perfect, even down to the very last, one of the last shots, I should say, of Return of the King, where 3 eagles were sent to collect the heroes at the end of the film. And you ask, 3? There was Frodo, there was Sam, there was third set to go collect Gollum. Gandalf ultimately believed that Gollum would have survived and be able to pass the test and come back as good. That, in of itself, is brilliant screenwriting. I love what we saw. I know it differs from the book in a couple major points, which we will talk about. But this trilogy, for me, best trilogy all time. I'll take it against any trilogy you guys have, and I will debate with you from a critical point, not just from a fanboying point, as to why these films are what they are, and they've made the impact in so many people's lives the way that they have. I don't really have much else for you guys. Leave your thoughts in the comments below as to what series I should go into next. I've already covered Rings of Power. I've covered The Hobbit. Now I'm about to finish up the Lord of the Rings. Let me know where you should go. Otherwise, you guys are probably looking at me covering Star Wars. We'll start with prequels, then go to the originals, and then to the sequels. So I have a lot of thoughts for you guys there. Be sure to subscribe if you are interested in that style of content. I've been Brett for Geek Variants. I will see you in the next video. In the one geek site to rule them all, Geek Variants.